set.
Hi, welcome to Home Time. I'm Joanne Liebler.
And I'm Dean Johnson. On the video you're about to see, we're going to take this lawn through the spring, summer, and fall. We're going to show you how to fertilize it, mow it, water it, and cure some of its trouble areas.
We'll also show you how to grow a new lawn from bare soil. We'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to prepare the soil and how to seed or sod it.
Home Time is made possible by Chevy Truck, who brings you tough, full-size Chevy pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers like you. Chevy S10 pickups, compact, fun, and hard-working. Chevy S10 Blazer, logic and laughter in 2- or 4-wheel drive. Chevy Astro, the van that can. The heartbeat of America, today's Chevy Truck.
This video is just one in a library of instructional programs designed to assist the viewer in working on a wide range of home improvement projects. And before we begin our program, I want to explain how you can best make use of this educational system. First off, you should watch the tape all the way through to get an idea of the methods, the steps, and the terminology we use. To help familiarize yourself with the terms, we've included a glossary in the project guide. Then you should review the tape again, only this time, check with your project guide to determine the tools and materials appropriate to your project. Then take the project guide to your local building supply dealer or home center. The people there will be able to assist you, answer questions, and direct you to what you need. When winter's over, people are anxious to start working on their lawns.
Having all that energy is great, but before you can actually get started, you have to know what kind of a lawn you're working with. So that's where we're going to start.
In general, you can split up grasses into 2 types, cool season grasses and warm season grasses. Within these 2 very broad categories, there are many more divisions that can be made, but when you want to find out what kind of a lawn you're working with, this is the place you start.
First, let's look at some of the most common cool season grasses. Cool season grasses are those that grow best during the cool periods of spring and fall. Kentucky bluegrass is one of these, and it's the workhorse of all the grasses. It spreads well, and you almost always find it in any seed mixture that's planted north of Virginia. Fescues are common cool season grasses. Fine-leaf tall fescue is very drought tolerant, and it has a nice pleasing texture and is found more in the mid-south and lower part of the north. Red fescue is more of a shade grass with a real fine texture, almost like hair. You'll find perennial ryegrass in almost every seed mixture in the north. It germinates fast and it's tough. It can take a lot of wear. However, it doesn't spread like bluegrass does, and if it's thin, you'll have to seed again.
Now for a look at a couple of common warm season grasses. Bermuda grass is one of the most widespread. It's grown in the mid-south to the south. It has a very deep root system and is very sturdy. It also spreads vigorously. The common types of Bermuda grass are seeded. Hybrid Bermudas are planted using vegetative parts. This lawn is made up primarily of St. Augustine grass. It grows very flat to the ground and with proper care can make a standout lawn. As for the soil the grass grows into, your soil is pretty much a fixed commodity, and that's okay because most soils on lawn sites will support good growth. Your grass plant is going to establish roots about 6 inches down. So the key to a good lawn is proper preparation when you establish a new lawn, then proper maintenance once it's grown in.
Before we actually dig into this lawn here, we want to stress a couple of things. Knowing the different grass types is important because your lawn's needs will be determined by the type of grass that you have and by where you live. Well, any lawn will most likely be a mix of lawn species.
Well, we aren't able to tell you exactly when to start watering your lawn or exactly the type of fertilizer to use on your lawn. What we can do is tell you how to carry out the correct procedures or the cultural practices, those things common to all yards. We're going to start with the care of an existing lawn, fertilizing, controlling weeds, insects, and disease, mowing, and watering.
Now, in general, spring is going to come earlier in the south than it does in the north, but you begin work on your lawn in much the same manner.
When spring comes, it's time to take a good look at your lawn. You should walk around and inspect it. At the same time, pick up any debris you find laying around, like twigs, dog bones, and stray toys. Look at how thick your lawn is. Check for any spots on the leaves of your grass that might indicate disease. Check to see if your lawn has a yellowish color. That could mean a nitrogen or an iron deficiency.
Throughout the winter, we use salt on our sidewalk to melt the ice. The salt burned out the grass underneath. You can see that it's dead. Now we could rake it, cultivate it, and replant with either seed or sod. Or we could wait until the salt leaches out, and then the grass will naturally replenish itself.
One of the biggest problems we have with our yard is shade, and lots of it. To grow grass, you need a minimum of 4 hours of direct sunlight, or a day of filtered sun. Even in the springtime, the trees are cutting off too much sunlight to the grass. Now we have a couple options. One is we can cut out some of the branches in the trees to let more light filter through, or we can try planting some shade-tolerant grass seed.
Because our grass near the sidewalk has always repaired itself before, we're not going to do anything special with those areas. And because we're in a cool season climate and it's best to plant seed during the fall, we're going to seed our shady spots then.
With all the debris removed from the yard, we're now ready to mow our grass for the first time this season. This mowing will be a little bit different from the other ones we'll be doing the rest of the year. For this cutting, we need to set the lawnmower 1 notch lower than its usual setting. We're adjusting the mower using these levers. This is a pretty simple procedure on current models.
With this cutting, we'll clear out a lot of the accumulation from winter. That's the reason for setting the mower lower. And with this cutting, we're going to bag the clippings. Now, we may or may not be doing that during the summer. We'll be talking a lot more about mowing later in the program.
We have a bit of a problem here. There's an obvious depression in the lawn. Now, to level this out, we have a couple of options. One is we could cut out the sod, add some fill, and then place the sod on top of it. The other is we could gradually raise the level by working with top dressing. We've decided to go with the top dressing method, in part because this depression isn't that bad, plus it is a whole lot easier. One thing to remember when working with a top dressing method is never add more than 1/4 of an inch at a time, and make certain that the soil you're using is weed-free.
As with our low spot, we'll use top dressing on our bare spot, although we can use a little bit more. We'll start by cultivating the soil a little, just breaking it up with a hand tool. If it were a larger area, we'd use a power tiller. This will help make a good bed for root development. In the south, spring is the best planting time because the growth season is just coming on. In the north, the fall is best, and we're located in the north. But we don't want to spend our whole summer staring at bare spots on our lawn, so we're going to go ahead and seed our spot anyway.
Looking for this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
We got a starter patch kit so we can get seed and fertilizer in smaller amounts. We'll start by fertilizing, and we'll follow the directions on the side of the box. We drop in a little seed, just as the directions say. And we're not going to worry about mulching now. This is a very small spot, so it shouldn't be necessary. In the next few weeks, we'll give our spot plenty of water until the plants are pretty well established.
Well, that's our first contact with the lawn so far this spring. I think we're ready to spread some fertilizer.
Or we could knock off until tomorrow. The right planning and the right tools make any home project go easier. And so does a new full-size Chevy pickup, like the ones we've got here. A long wheelbase 2-wheel drive model, and an extended cab with 4-wheel drive.
These trucks look good, don't they? And they're tough. Base coat clear coat paint is used for a brilliant finish and is part of 7 layers of corrosion protection in critical areas. And underneath the aerodynamic styling is one of the heaviest frames ever made for a full-size Chevy pickup.
Both of these big Chevys come with an 8-foot cargo box, so they can carry 4x8 sheets flat on the floor with the tailgate closed. Plus, you can insert supports here in the box sides for double-deck loading.
The regular full-size Chevy cab has plenty of room for 3 people. If you want even more room, this extended cab model is the way to go. With available seating, there's all kinds of space in here for up to 6 people. You can also fold the available rear seat down or up for additional lockable storage space in back.
This model also has 4-wheel drive, so InstaTrack is standard. InstaTrack lets you shift from freewheeling 2-wheel drive to 4-wheel drive high and back again at any speed. You don't have to slow down, stop, or back up. InstaTrack lets you stay in this comfortable cab and shift on the fly.
You'll shift with hard-working, fuel-injected power, too. These big Chevys come with a 160 horsepower, 4.3-liter Vortec V6 Depending on the model, you can also get available V8s with up to 230 horsepower.
On wet or icy roads, you'll like the standard rear-wheel anti-lock brake system, or ABS for short. It's designed to give smooth, stable stops. On a four-wheel drive model, ABS operates only when the truck's in two-wheel drive.
Treat yourself to a test drive of a new full-size Chevy pickup. Two- or four-wheel drive, regular or extended cab.
You'll see why today's Chevy truck is the heartbeat of America. Well, we're all set to start doing our fertilizing this morning. Now, a general rule of thumb on when to do the first application of fertilizer is after the first flush of spring growth. And of course, this varies in different parts of the country.
Before you actually begin fertilizing, you may want to take a soil test. Most experts agree it's a good idea if your lawn was yellow last year or had any other obvious problems, and yet you felt as though you were doing a good job of maintaining the lawn. Most places will accept a soil sample in a home container. They need between a half pint and a pint. You should take about a dozen samples from various parts of your lawn and shake the dirt off. Check with the county agriculture office about the proper procedures in your area. Most often, they can mail you a soil testing kit that you can mail right back to them. There's usually a small fee for this service. Now, you could have a soil test done if you're just plain curious or a real lawn hobbyist, and most experts say you should have a soil test done if you're starting a new lawn.
We thought since we've had a pretty healthy yard in the past, we wouldn't need a soil test. Had we had a soil test done, it'd probably tell us something about how to fertilize. Instead, we'll be using a fertilizer program available at a local supplier that'll control pests and feed the lawn. In the spring, we want to add a complete fertilizer, one with all three primary elements. The first element listed is always nitrogen. The second element is always phosphorus. The third element is always potassium, usually called by its carrier, which is potash. The nitrogen is primarily for color and density. It helps the plant grow thick. The phosphorus enhances root growth and seedling development. And the potash is good for the general health and vigor of the plant. In the spring, a grass needs all three of these elements to grow, kind of a balanced diet for the grass plant. Most important with your fertilizer is knowing the type of grass you have. Check with your local supplier of garden products to see what's correct for your region, and read any warning labels on the fertilizer bag. Some fertilizers come mixed with insecticides and herbicides that could harm your grass, and that'll be on the label. The label will also tell you how much fertilizer you should apply to your lawn. Because the needs of lawns vary greatly from region to region across the country, manufacturers formulate their fertilizers differently. Even though the outside of the package may look the same across the country, inside the fertilizer is formulated specifically for the area of the country in which it's sold.
There's a right way and a wrong way to spread dry fertilizer. Some people still swear by the old hand method, just taking a handful and tossing it right out there. But as you can guess, there's a problem with even distribution, and you really shouldn't be touching some fertilizers that have insecticides or herbicides in them. What we recommend is using a mechanical spreader. One of the most common is the push-type drop spreader. This type of spreader is slower than the rotary style, but it may be more effective in getting a uniform application. With this type of equipment, you have to be careful not to overlap rows or skip space in between. If you do, you can see what happens. You get that famous striped effect, and everyone on the block knows just what's happened. The push-type rotary spreader is another common style. You don't have to handle the fertilizer, you can still go fast, and problems with overlap aren't as great, especially with a rotary that spreads in a small range. That small pattern gives you a lot of control.
We'll be using a combination product. Now, our lawn is primarily Kentucky bluegrass, which is a cool season grass. And right now is a good time to add crabgrass preventer because crabgrass is yet to start germinating. So we can feed the grass with a fertilizer while at the same time adding a crabgrass preventer. In general, you need to apply crabgrass preventer before the third or fourth cutting of your lawn. And the general rule of thumb across the country is that if you had crabgrass last year, you'll probably want to apply a preventer this year. And if you didn't have crabgrass last year, you won't need a preventer this year, and you can feed with straight fertilizer. Figuring out what kind of fertilizer to use and when can be tricky business. You can check with your local outlet for garden supplies, or you can call the 1-800 number listed in the project guide.
We're using a rotary type spreader because it's fast and easy. And when you fill your spreader, you should always do it over a driveway or a patio, never directly over the grass. And another thing to watch out for when you're fertilizing is wind. Wind will scatter your fertilizer to places you don't want it to go. Fortunately, we have a calm day.
Now all we have to do is set the adjustment on the spreader according to the instructions on the fertilizer bag.
Well, looks like you're all set to go, Dean.
Yep, already. Fertilizing should always go like this. Start by making a header, going around the perimeter of the lawn. Then spread the fertilizer by going back and forth inside the header. When you come to a tree, simply pick up the spreader, walk around the tree, and start spreading the fertilizer on the other side of the tree.
Because we've got a herbicide in our fertilizer, we're being extra careful to keep it away from our garden areas. And we're also avoiding the spots we've just seeded and our shady areas. Now, we've got just a couple of words of warning. If you do apply too much fertilizer, don't overreact. Vacuum or rake up any obvious big spills. If you've over-fertilized a wide area, give that part of your lawn an extra shot of water, but not too much. You don't want muddy soil. Then wait 2 or 3 weeks and be encouraged if you see some grass start to grow, because your grass may be able to repair itself. Again, if you have questions about a problem with your fertilizing, remember the 1-800-HELP number listed in your project guide. Depending on where you live, you may be fertilizing once or twice more during the growing season. Warm season grasses are typically fertilized more often and with more nitrogen. And our experts say that with cool season grasses, you want to avoid a lot of nitrogen in the heat of the summer.
We want to stress that no one fertilizer program is correct for all lawns, especially programs that contain weed and insect control.
For our lawn, we're through for a while. So far, we've spruced it up by giving it a short spring cutting. We've cleaned up the debris, patched up the bare spots, and touched up the low spots, and fertilized with a crabgrass preventer. Now, we can just let it grow and wait for a good spring rain. Then we'll come back and talk about mowing and watering.
Remember that spring rain we were hoping for? Well, we didn't get it. So to make it a little easier to keep our lawn in good shape, we decided to install a sprinkler system.
And we hired a crew to do the installation. After figuring the proper placement for the sprinkler heads on our lawn, the installation crew used an automatic pipe puller to pull polyethylene pipe between the heads. It's a pretty slick operation. The crew can go underneath the driveway without damaging the driveway itself. The whole installation process, from planning the sprinkling pattern to connecting the automatic timer, took less than a day. If you're interested in installing an automatic irrigation system yourself, check out our home time tape on sprinkler systems.
Since it's been about 4 weeks since we last fertilized, we're ready to feed the lawn again. Typically, this application takes place in late spring.
We're going to fertilize to keep the lawn green, but also to try to control some weeds that have started to rear their ugly heads.
Okay, you're all set here.
Unlike crabgrass, you really can't prevent broadleaf weeds. You have to try to kill them once they've appeared. Here are 3 of the most common types: dandelions, clover, and creeping Charlie. Their leaves are broader than a grass plant, hence the name, broadleaf weeds.
The reason we're using chemicals to control these weeds is because if we try to pull them by hand, we're likely to leave roots in the soil and the plant will come back. Just a 1/4 inch of a dandelion root left in the lawn is enough for the plant to return. The combination fertilizer and weed killer we're using shouldn't be watered in, so we must wait 24 hours before we sprinkle.
In keeping with our fertilizing program, we'll be fertilizing next toward the end of summer.
For now, we'll let the lawn get some water using our new irrigation system. Once the lawn's had a chance to grow, we'll come back and discuss proper watering and mowing techniques.
Now it's late summer, and we can talk about 2 more of the basics of lawn care: cutting the lawn and watering it.
Because we don't want to cut the lawn while it's still wet, we'll show you mowing first. The main questions about mowing your yard are how high, how often, and what do you do with your clippings? Of course, all these answers will vary on your type of lawn. First of all, make sure you have a sharp blade. If the blade is dull, it'll tear and bruise the leaf end of the grass plant. Then your lawn will get a whitish cast to it, and in a couple of days will look sort of brown. Now the question of how high to cut the grass. This, of course, varies with the type of grass you have. But for all grasses, the ideal is to never remove more than 1/3 of the leaf surface in any one cutting. Take a look at this grass plant before mowing. Now take a look at this one after mowing. there is still plenty of green leaves on top of the stem. Even this one, cut lower, is okay. There's still lots of green leaves, and the plant will survive. But this grass plant is doomed. There are no leaves left, no chlorophyll, and so no new growth. If your mower is cutting this low, raise it up a ½ inch. This summer, we've been keeping our Kentucky bluegrass at about 2½ inches. Once we watered it properly, we got pretty good growth and found the cutting schedule to be about once a week, which is a pretty typical schedule for the growth season. Now about actually doing the cutting. The big question is, does a pattern make a difference? And the answer is, it might. The pattern of your cutting only makes a difference if the wheels of your mower compact the soil to make tracks. If that's happening, you should alternate the pattern each time you mow in order to avoid marks in your lawn. Otherwise, it's just a matter of personal preference. Now about the clippings, we think the best procedure is to bag the clippings, and here's why. If you let them lay on the lawn, especially if they're wet and matted, they can smother the grass. It's true that grass clippings will add nutrients to your lawn, but it'll take months for the grass to break down. In the meantime, you could be contributing to a thatch problem. Thatch is a layer of dead material between the grass blades and the soil, but we'll be getting into this more later on. And remember, we're on a fertilizing program that should be properly feeding the yard, so we really shouldn't need any extra nutrients.
Well, now that Dean's done with the mowing, we can pass on a few tips about watering. Our underground sprinkler system has made watering a breeze. And throughout the summer, we've been careful to check and make sure that the heads aren't clogged. But whether you have an underground system or a portable sprinkler, there's an easy test that will tell you how much water is penetrating into the ground. You take 4 straight-sided pans or cans and just lay them out in a straight line from the sprinkler. Let the sprinkler go for about a ½ hour. Then check the pan to see how much water you've got. This brings us to the question of how much water you want to put into your lawn. Well, this will vary, of course, depending on how much nature is providing. But as a rule, here's what you're looking for. In sand, a ½ inch of water will penetrate to a depth of about 6 inches. Most of the grass roots are located in that area, so a ½ inch of water will saturate to the roots of the grass plant. Any more water than that in one sprinkling is wasteful. And as to how often you should water, well, during the growing season, a lawn generally needs between 1 or 2 inches of water per week. And our experts say you can water any time during the day. Just avoid night watering, because this can contribute to diseases.
Now that we're late in the summer, it's time to take care of another lawn problem, insects. We can do this using a combination fertilizing product. Signs of insects are birds on the lawn that look like they might be feeding, or a lawn that's brown even though it's getting plenty of water, or insects that flutter up as you walk through the grass. 3 of the most common insects are grubs, sod webworms, and chinch bugs. One application of our insect control will take care of all 3 of these, as well as other insects that are trouble for our lawn. If you've got questions about an insect problem in your lawn, call the Scott's toll-free number and ask them. They'll be glad to help you.
There's one more thing that we're going to fix right now that's the remnant of a neighborhood visitor. The neighborhood dog has left her mark. First, rake out the dead grass. Then rake in a little lime. Loosen up the soil to work in the lime. And flush it well with water. You should flush with water over a couple of days. Then rake the spot up again, and you're ready to seed it or put a piece of sod down. We're taking a piece of sod from a less conspicuous part of the yard, and this should fill in nicely.
Well, Jojo, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, well, pretty soon the whole lawn is going to look great.
Yeah.
That's because it's going to be fall, and then we can do our seeding. And we'll be back in a few weeks to do that.
We're now at the prime seeding time for our part of the country, so it's a good time to hit all the bare spots. We have moderate temperatures, and the ground is still warm from the summertime, so we want to seed before all the leaves start falling and smother the grass. We also want to give the grass plenty of time to establish itself before the ground freezes.
The first thing we're going to do is break up the soil a little, just the top inch or so. Then we're going to spread some starter fertilizer. We could use a spreader on this, but since we're working on such a small patch, we're just going to shake it right out of the box. Then we toss some of our shady grass mixture onto the areas that we want to seed. Again, we're not going to use a spreader here, although it might not be a bad idea. We're just going to do it by hand and try to keep the seed pretty evenly spread. A good guideline for how much seed you want on the ground is about 16 grains per square inch. Next, we rake in the seed to make sure it's mixed in with the soil. We just mix up the top quarter-inch of soil with the seed.
The next thing we'll do is make certain that the seed is pressed firmly in the soil. On a larger area, we could roll it, but on a patch this small, we'll do what's called footing it. We press the seed into the soil with our feet, watching out that we don't have any obvious ridges or depressions. If we've done this right, we won't be able to see our footprints when we're all through. All right, all that's left for us to do is water the seed properly.
You want to keep the top quarter-inch of soil moist until the seeds germinate. And with this shady grass mixture, that should happen in a couple of weeks.
Within a few weeks, we're getting good cover. We're still having moderate temperatures, in the 60s and 70s, and don't have to worry about frost yet. It looks like the plants will be well rooted when it starts to get cold. So the new grass is doing well, but we will avoid our new grass areas when we do our next big job, aerating.
Fall is a beautiful time of year in our part of the country, and it's also one of the most important times to do work on your lawn. So Dean's picked up an aerator from a rental company. We're going to pump some new life into this lawn.
Aerating will improve the resilience of your lawn. We'll be breaking up compacted soil, and we'll also be helping to get rid of thatch. Okay, pull it back out. You got a hold there?
Thatch is that layer of material between the soil and the grass blades. It's made up of dead plant matter that hasn't decomposed. A half-inch or so is good, but when you start to get 3/4 to an inch of it, your lawn will start to suffer. You should aerate your lawn if you have a compaction problem, or if the thatch is too thick, or if you just want a good, healthy lawn about every 2 to 3 years. The aerator we've rented pulls out little plugs from the soil and leaves them on the lawn. There are different machines you can rent for this job. It's okay to leave the plugs on the lawn. That's what we're doing. As for when to do this procedure, here are a couple of tips. You shouldn't aerate when your grass is too wet or too dry. If you've had particularly dry weather, water your lawn a couple of days before you want to aerate it. Across the country, the fall is generally a good time to aerate, but you can also do this in the spring. If you're going to aerate and fertilize on the same day, aerate first and fertilize second.
This way the fertilizer will get down into the root zone. That's especially important for the phosphorus and potash. This fall application should be a complete fertilizer, one with all 3 primary elements. So we fertilized our lawn 4 times this summer. We've mowed and watered properly and aerated in the fall. These are the basic elements in a sound lawn care program. On the next part of the program, we'll start from the ground up. We'll be establishing a new lawn with bare soil and seed.
We'll transform this lot from tons of topsoil to a beautiful, lush lawn in just a matter of months.
Our lot has a few problems that are common to many new homes. Let's start by taking a look at the front yard.
Before we begin working on the lawn, we've made sure that our landscaping is in and our sidewalk's been poured. We've got a few trees to work around, but really, we're looking at a pretty straightforward job here in the front yard.
Our lot goes a ways back along this boulevard. It was planted with a nurse crop of cereal rye for cover.
Between the boulevard and the back of the house, we have kind of an island of natural growth, and we've decided to leave it like that and just add a few native wildflowers. This whole area used to be forest, and we want to leave as much as possible intact. This will also give us a little privacy from the road nearby. Now it's behind the house that we have our real problem.
I'm walking beside one of the biggest headaches of the yard. The rough grade has left us with a slope that's going to be too steep to mow. So we tilled it by hand, then planted some sumac. Then we'll final rake, plant some sturdy grass seed, and then lay an excelsior blanket over the whole thing to act as a mulch. Once the grass has grown, it should hold the dirt as well as anything. And we'll just let this area go. We won't worry about mowing it. Ideally, down the road, this area will be terraced and some retaining walls added, but probably not until the shock of new construction is over with.
Let's run down what equipment we'll need for this job. We'll be using a tape measure, a tractor and tiller attachment, a hand tiller, a water-filled roller, garden rakes, shovels, a wheelbarrow, a lawn spreader, seed, starter fertilizer, straw, and lots of water.
Now that our builder has gotten our seed bed to a rough grade, we have to figure out how large a lawn we're going to have. So we'll have to measure it.
Okay, you go to the pine tree.
This is basically a common sense issue. We've just got to go around, measure whatever rectangles we can find, and remember some simple geometry to get the total square footage. When you measure, don't worry about a couple of feet here and there. You don't have to be that precise. And keep these figures once you've done them, because you'll probably need them in years to come, and you won't want to measure your yard again. Once you've added up all your figures, you might want to round off your lawn in 1,000 square foot units. This is a common unit of measure used in lawn care, and the equipment you use and the materials you buy might be calibrated by that unit.
Now that our lot's at rough grade, we'll want to till down far enough to make sure that the topsoil mixes in with the subsoil underneath.
All the heavy machinery that's been moving around on the soil has compacted it pretty well, and if we don't till it up, we could end up with a barrier between the topsoil and the subsoil. And if we have a barrier, water may not move well between the soils, and our grass roots may not penetrate the subsoil very well. We're going to use a tractor with a tiller attachment that will make sure that we get down at least 4 to 6 inches. That should get us down to the subsoil.
And we're going to use a tractor on as much of the yard as possible because it's a big job. And in the places where we can't use the tractor attachment, we use this hand tiller. Before Dean does the tilling, I'm going to spread some starter fertilizer. Our experts recommend this in order to get 2 of the fertilizer's elements, potash and phosphorus, deep into the ground about 6 inches. The nitrogen should be dilute enough so that it won't hurt anything. I've set the spreader according to the directions on the bag. I'm using a rotary spreader because it's very fast and easy. This application is called the reserve fertilizer, and its purpose is to get the phosphorus and potash down deep into the soil so they'll be there when the plant's roots grow down. Phosphorus and potash tend to stay where they're put in soil. They don't move much. That's why we're going to till them down so far. If you're pretty sure you've got plenty of phosphorus and potash in your soil, you may skip this step.
Once Joanna spread the fertilizer, I can start tilling. The rototilling is a tough job. In the back, we're working on compacted clay. Our tractor just isn't big enough to really break up the soil. We made several passes in different directions, but still couldn't get down more than a couple of inches. However, our experts say that should be deep enough for the grass to hold and germinate. In the front, the soil had compacted between the time the builder graded it out and the time we were ready to till it. We had to make a couple of passes in different directions to adequately mix in the fertilizer, mix in the subsoil, and break up the topsoil. We've only had to use the hand tiller in a few spots where we need to be extra careful, like next to this edging. With each pass of the tiller, our soil gets broken up. We do this until the soil seems almost creamy. After we roll this, it'll be perfect.
As we're tilling, we're breaking up any soil clods that are larger than a golf ball, but we don't want to break the soil up to the point where it's powdery. And we're also getting rid of any more debris that we uncover. Breaking up the clods by hand is tedious work, and it's too big a job for our whole yard. So on the less prominent sections, we're going to even out our seed bed by dragging a section of chain link fence across the top. The seed bed that results isn't perfect, but grass will grow here. At this point, we've got our seed bed at rough grade, and we've tilled in our reserve fertilizer. In fact, if we weren't going to install a sprinkler system, we'd be ready to move on.
But we are going to install a sprinkler system, and we'll use some of the dollars that we saved by seeding rather than sodding to pay for a portion of the system.
So we'll have a crew come in, install the system, and we'll take a few days off. Then we'll come back and finish the job. Now that the sprinkler system is in, we can move on to the seeding. We're going to be doing something called taking the seed bed to a final grade.
What this means is we'll want to smooth out the soil and then get it settled and firmed in. We're raking to even things out after the sprinkler installation. We want to get rid of low spots where water might stand, and we want to get rid of high spots that might get scalped by a mower. We're going to get rid of any rocks that are still left and generally put the finishing touches on our seed bed. Once we're pretty sure we've got a smooth surface, we're ready to roll.
We're going to roll our seed bed to firm it up. Rolling will help ensure we get a uniform planting for the new seed. And we're using a standard water-filled roller that we've rented.
One tip here is you probably don't want to fill this thing all the way up. Even a third full, it should get the job done no problem.
Here, I'll clear this out of your way.
Okay, I'll plug this guy up. The big question here is how firm do you want your soil? And the general guideline is you want it firm enough so that you don't see your footprints as you go along. To make sure we don't hit the sprinkler heads, they're all marked with a flag.
After Dean's gone over the soil with the roller, I'm going to water just lightly, just to settle the dirt. Our experts recommend that you don't want to water too much at this point, or it'll just make a muddy mess of the planting.
With our seed bed rolled and settled, we're ready for planting.
Now, granted, we are using seed on the lawn, but the preparation and procedures would be the same if we were using sod, sprigs, or plugs.
So here's what it looks like when it's ready to go. It's smooth, there are no weeds, no obvious depressions, and it's full of the right kind of fertilizers to help your grass get started. Before we actually begin seeding, we want to explain what to look for when buying grass seed. Each package of grass seed will have an analysis of what's inside. The percentages in this analysis are by weight. Grasses of an improved variety have a name in front of them, like Victa, Kentucky bluegrass, or Ovation and Derby, perennial ryegrass. The germination rate tells us how much of the seed is capable of growth under ideal laboratory conditions. The higher this is, the better. Under other ingredients, look for 0% or close to it in crop seed. Inert matter should be as low as you can get because that's just filler. And you want as little weed seed as possible. Noxious weeds have to be named and counted separately. They're listed by seed count. It's also important to understand seed count. The actual number of seeds per pound can vary because the size and weight of grass seed varies quite a bit. Keeping these tips in mind, the most important factors to remember in selecting the right type of grass for you are where you live and how you plan on using your lawn. To review, grasses typically fall into two categories: warm season grasses and cool season grasses. You should talk to your local supplier about what type of grass grows best in your area.
Now we can actually begin to seed and spread a little more starter fertilizer. In terms of procedure, there really isn't much difference between the two. All we need to do is change the calibration on the spreader according to the seed manufacturer's directions. What have we got there? 29?
Okay, 29, yeah. That'll do it.
We're just going to make one pass, trying to keep the rows even so we don't miss a spot or overseed an area.
Now we want to add some more fertilizer, except this time we want to get the fertilizer right down next to the seed.
It really doesn't matter which one you add first, the seed or the starter fertilizer. All you need to remember is that you can't mix the two together and spread them all at once.
Okay, Joe, this is set. The next thing we need to do is to give the seed a little cover. To do this, we'll rake the ground very lightly.
Another method to cover seed is to drag a piece of carpet across the seed bed. And I'm going to do this in certain parts of the yard to save time.
Now the trick here is to handle the rake very gently. Just float it across the top of the soil. You don't want to move the seed around too much. Just cover it lightly with the soil. The rake marks will leave slight depressions where water can stand. The purpose of this is to mix the seed in with the soil. We're trying to keep the seed within a 1/4 inch from the top. Any further down, and you could risk slowing down germination or preventing it altogether. Now it's time to roll again, to get the seed firmly into the seed bed, except this time, it's Joanne's turn.
Don't work up too much of a sweat there, Dean.
We're rolling to make sure the seed is in contact with the soil. This should help it germinate. We'll roll the whole lot, and then if we want to, we're ready to mulch. We'll be using mulch in part of the yard. Typically, mulch is used to conserve water, control weeds, and primarily we're using it to prevent soil and water erosion on this incline coming around the side of the house. We'll be using straw mulch. Straw is probably the most common mulch material used across the country. It's cheap, easy to apply, and will rot right into the soil. The one drawback with it is that it can be quite messy. With any mulch, you want to be sure that it's not more than a 1/4 inch deep. With our straw, 1/4 of an inch translates to about 2 or 3 straws deep.
That's really it for the tough part of the job. The next part is easier, but perhaps the most important. That is giving water to the new seed. In the next few weeks, this will be crucial. So I'm going to set the sprinkler system to water 3 times a day, at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. And if the weather is especially hot or dry this month, I'll add even more water. It's crucial to keep the seedlings moist until the grass plants are well-rooted and established. Many times, homeowners think a grass seed didn't sprout, but in reality, it dies because it was too dry at the seedling stage. During germination, keep the top 1/4 inch of the soil moist with frequent light waterings. As the grass begins to grow, decrease the number of times per day you water, but increase the quantity of water you apply.
Well, that's the process for establishing a new lawn using seed. We use seed because it's less expensive, and the experts say in the long run, you'll end up with a better lawn.
It's more expensive, but you'll have a lawn faster if you use vegetative parts, like sod, sprigs, or plugs. So let's take a look at some of those. Sod is one of the most popular. It's more expensive than seed, but you have an instant lawn when you're all through. And there's no risk that a hard rain could wash away all your work, like it could wash away new seed. The sod should be 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. And as a test, take a piece of sod, roll it out in one piece, and hold it up. If it holds together, it's good. When you start to lay the sod, choose an area with a long, straight line, one that requires the least cutting of your pieces. The edges must be tightly pressed together, the ends too, as you lay the sod in a brickwork pattern. It's okay to cut sod to fit odd corners. Just make sure you use a sharp knife and don't let the patch piece dry out. It's a good idea to roll the sod to make sure it's pressed firmly into the soil. Then water the new sod thoroughly so that you saturate the sod and the soil. You should water the sod every day for the first week to 10 days. If you've overordered and have some sod left over, you might want to make a compost pile out of it.
Or you could make friends with the neighbors and give them a few pieces. There aren't many lawns that couldn't use a patch job here and there.
That's true.
You got this one?
I got this one.
Okay. Now about plugs. You can cut sod into plugs, or you can buy plugs to start your new lawn. Our experts suggest a 2-inch plug is best. Plugs are used most commonly for hybrid Bermudas, zoysia, or St. Augustine grasses. For the Bermuda, for example, you plant the plug at about 12-inch centers, and within 3 to 4 weeks, you'll have a decent cover, a good cover in about 2 months. Sprigs are another vegetative way to start your lawn. They're used most commonly for a plant hybrid, when there's no viable seed available. Sprigs are usually used for hybrid Bermudas, St. Augustine, or zoysia. They're usually planted in rows 6 to 12 inches apart. So with the seed in the ground, the only thing we have left to do is wait and watch.
And traditionally, people don't think it's too exciting to sit around and watch the grass grow.
Not particularly.
But we can speed things up. Watch this. Now we're 4 weeks in, and we know firsthand something our experts have been telling us, that growing a new lawn isn't an exact science. In fact, you have to adapt as you go along.
Well, we're doing okay. It's just that we've run into some real tough luck with the weather. We've just gone through the driest month in the history of our area, and the temperatures have been abnormally high. It's been a little bit like living in the Sahara Desert. Most of our trouble is in the front yard. There are parts of the lawn that look brown because of dead grass. You can see that the grass here is germinated, grown a little bit, and then died. We'll add a little seed to these spots to fill them in. We've also got quite a few weeds in the front. These probably came from weed seeds that were in the topsoil we used to bring our lot up to grade.
We're at the point where we can mow for the first time, and we'll accomplish a couple of different things with this cutting. First, it's actually necessary to cut the new grass. That helps the grass grow laterally and gives us better density. So for this cutting, we set the mower at about 2.5 inches, and we bag the clippings. Second, we'll get a start on getting rid of the weeds that have cropped up in the front yard. In addition to looking bad, these weeds compete for moisture and nutrients with our grass seedlings, so we want to get rid of them. The good news is these are annual weeds, and they should die off after a couple of cuttings with the mower. At this time, about 4 weeks after seeding, We can also put down another application of a complete fertilizer, and that'll help the seedlings grow. Here along the boulevard, we can see a few more of the things we've done right and wrong. We've got some pretty good growth here, and that makes us glad because this was not the greatest seed bed. That's one of the things we did right. What we did wrong is pretty obvious. At times, we switched and used a drop spreader here, and we just didn't apply the seed and fertilizer evenly. And that's why we have this striping effect. And look at this. We've got a large tuft of grass here, really too much grass. What probably happened is we stopped the spreader here to refill it. Some grass seed spilled out, and then when we moved on, we missed a spot. Now, when I'm done mowing here, we're going to reseed some of these bare spots and some of the bare spots in the front yard. And we're also going to throw down some more mulch in hopes of retaining moisture in this hot, dry weather. Here on the side of the house, we've got some of our best grass, and here's the reason why. This part of the yard has gotten more shade than any other. So the grass here was protected from the blistering heat that killed off some of the grass in the front yard. You can still see some of the straw we used as mulch. It helped to keep the soil moist, and it held the seed in place on this slope. The mulch has already started to rot into the soil. And here in the back, we got some very interesting results. Remember, this was the area that was all compacted clay. We were able to loosen only the top inch or two of the soil, and we planted our grass seed in that. Now look at it. The grass here is quite even, and it's pretty dense. And what's most interesting is that there aren't many weeds. Now, the weeds in the front yard came from the topsoil, but we didn't use any topsoil back here, so we're relatively weed-free. That does it for the first cutting of our new lawn. Pretty soon, the grass will start to fill in. We've also cut way down on our watering since the initial germination period. Now we're watering once or twice a day, about a half hour at a time.
The lawn should really start taking shape over the next few weeks, so let's watch that happen. Boy, this is really looking great.
Yeah, it's turned into a regular green carpet.
As you can see, the lawn is really filling in. We got lucky and finally got some cooler temperatures.
Well, let's just take a look at what we've got. Here in the front, our bare spots have pretty much filled in. And there's something else worth noting.
What's that?
The weeds, or should I say the lack of them.
Yeah, that's true.
In the beginning, we had a real problem with weeds, but through proper mowing procedures, we've been able to stay ahead of the problem. We haven't been able to get rid of them all, but we'll treat the weed problem chemically next year. That's pretty common practice for a new seed lawn.
Now let's go to my favorite part of the lawn, the boulevard. This long stretch here is filled in beautifully. Our fix-up job worked just as we had hoped it would.
Mulching the areas we reseeded was a good idea. The seed stayed in place, and now we've got good even growth. Now let's go to my favorite part of the yard, the back of the house.
Okay. So this is looking pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Coming in really well.
This is an area of the yard we were most nervous about when we started. Now it's turned out to be one of the most beautiful parts of the lawn. Even with just about an inch of loose clay to grow in, the grass has taken hold and filled in.
The grass along this slope is also doing well. This was another really nerve-wracking area, a real steep slope that we had to hold in place. Remember that we had to till this up by hand, so there were plenty of big clods of soil. We used a real sturdy grass. The grass here has taken well, and the sumac that we planted is also flourishing. We like this untampered look. It fits in real well with a rugged backyard, and the sumac should be really beautiful in the fall. Well, we've just been through probably one of the worst summers for growing grass in about 50 years, and done it successfully. Now all that's left to do is a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of mowing, a little bit of fertilizing, a little bit of watering.
Well, as we said earlier, growing a lawn from seed isn't an exact science. You have to adapt to situations as they crop up. But eventually, you can end up with a beautiful and sturdy lawn.
Well, there's something kind of satisfying about growing a new lawn from seed.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like nurturing a garden. You find yourself almost rooting for each little grass plant to grow. Get it? Rooting for
Oh.
the grass plants to grow.
Oh,
It's pretty
Joanne,
good,
that's,
huh?
that's terrible.
No.
See you next time on Home Time.
What do you mean it's terrible?
Come on,
That's
let's
good.
go. Will you
Puns are
embarrass
great.
yourself?
Home Time is made possible by Chevy Truck, who brings you tough, full-size Chevy pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers like you. Chevy S10 pickups, compact, fun, and hard-working. Chevy S10 Blazer, logic and laughter in 2- or 4-wheel drive. Chevy Astro, the van that can. The heartbeat of America. Today's Chevy Truck.
Before you start a major home project on your own, getting a tough new Chevy truck to help out is a smart thing to do. The best way to check out the model that interests you is to take a test drive at your local Chevy dealer. And here's a tip on how to buy your new Chevy truck and get the options you want, while saving some money too. Ask your dealer about preferred equipment groups of options. There's special packages of options most truck buyers want, and usually order individually. Options that can include popular items such as air conditioning and automatic transmission. When you buy them as part of a preferred equipment group, you can save a lot. You'll get them at savings based on manufacturer's suggested retail prices compared to the same options purchased separately. It's more economical for Chevy to offer you options as a package or group. Chevy saves and passes the savings on to you. You'll enjoy the options while you own your Chevy truck, and they can add to its resale or trade-in value. So any way you look at it, preferred equipment groups of options are a good idea, and they're available on all new Chevy full-size pickups, S10 pickups, and S10 Blazers. Your Chevy dealer has all the latest details. Preferred equipment groups of options are another money-saving idea from today's Chevy truck, the heartbeat of America.